Alright, what's up, reviewers? This is Smooth the Reviewer, and today I'm going to be talking to my Classroom of the Elite fans. It has been so long since I've talked about Classroom of the Elite. I know I honestly should have made this video a whole lot sooner, and there's honestly like just so much that has happened, and then there's like so much to talk about. I didn't even have my review of Year 2 Volume 12 out. I didn't even put that out yet, but that's what this video is going to be for. I'm going to be talking about Year 2 Volume 12 and Year 2 Volume 12.5, so I can just get all my thoughts on like both, or at least most of my thoughts on both volumes out, because honestly, guys, these two volumes back to back are some of the best volumes in the entire series. And I don't think I'm alone with that, guys. Like the final special exam of the second year in volume 12, and then the aftermath in volume 12.5, which was released a few weeks ago and has pretty much been translated by unofficial sources. But luckily for me, I've read them, and some of the sources have been taken down with like the fan translations, but luckily for me, I've been able to read both volumes, and that's why I can talk about both of them in this video. And yeah, these two volumes are easily, like, I would say like easily probably top 10 volumes in the entire series, just because they both have really good payoff to everything that has just been built up throughout pretty much the entire second year, to be honest. Okay, so first, let me start off with volume 12, and I'm going to just try to keep my thoughts a little bit brief on that one, since I'm sure we've all read it, and most of you guys watching this video are probably here for volume 12.5. So first thing with volume 12, I want to say I did in fact enjoy that volume. I think the year-end special exam for it was pretty much worth it, because before that volume released, people had a lot of doubts, like, okay, is this special exam really going to be worth it? Because it had so much hype behind it. Okay, so we all know about like the inevitable battle between Ryuin and then right here, and then Sakayanagi. Their battle was hyped up so much for the final exam, and it needed to deliver, or else it would have just been a disappointment overall. And then we had, of course, Ichinose fighting against Horikita in this volume too. That had a little bit hype against it. I mean, for it, because Ichinose had just had her development in volume 9, and yeah, so that fight was a little bit hype for me also. But let's just get right into it. So basically, this final special exam was basically the werewolf game. Okay, so if you read the volume, the rules were like super super complicated for it, and most of the rules didn't really matter. But it was basically kind of like werewolf game, where it's like the representatives had to basically figure out who was like the werewolf in the groups they were watching. So they had the group representatives. So you remember they had the vanguard, the middle guard, and then the general. And I actually had my prediction, as you see on here on the screen here. These were all my predictions of who could be the representatives, class A, B, C, and D at the time, right before the volume came out. And honestly, it was a little bit sad for me that most of my predictions didn't really come true, because as you can see here, I had people like Kaneda Ishizaki in the vanguard. I had people like Shibata, Himeno, Hamaguchi in this vanguard's position too. I had Amikura in the middle guard, and then I had Sudo right here for class B inside the middle guard too, and Kushida too. And that's what I'm gonna get into also, because it's even more disappointing for me that most of the people I just named didn't even really make an appearance either. So pretty much for class A, we know the vanguard ended up being this guy Sanada, who I don't think he didn't have an illustration in this volume, but the vanguard for class A was Sanada. Then the middle guard was Kito, this guy, and then of course general was Sakayanagi. So basically, the Kinugasa went with pretty much all the basic people. For Class B, it was Hirata out in front, Vanguard. Then middle guard was actually Horikita because Horikita made a bet with Ayano Koji that he wanted to be the general, and then if he lost, then he would have to help for the rest of the year. And so Ayano Koji became the general. Then for Class C, actually, the Vanguard for Class C was actually Nishino. And that was definitely a shock for me because I thought for sure it would have been Hiyori, this girl, but it actually wasn't. It was Nishino. And then we had Katsuragi right here as the middle guard, and then we had Ryuin as the general. And then last but not least, for Ichinose's Class D, of course, Ichinose, she was the general. Then we had Kanzaki as actually the middle guard. And then the vanguard was Hamaguchi, who, yeah, Hamaguchi doesn't have really a lot of spotlight. He has like one illustration. So the reason why it's also pretty much disappointing for me is because not only did like most of my predictions not really come true, even though I do have a lot of them right. Like, of course, I have Kanzaki here, then Katsuragi, Ryuin, then Horikita. So I got pretty much most of the general and then the middle guard right. But none of the other characters I have here even really showed up. So I had Kushida and then Sudo in the middle guard, and then they weren't even in the volume, I'm pretty sure. Like Kushida, she was mentioned in the volume. It was literally stated that Kushida probably would have even been better than Hirata as like the vanguard, but like she didn't even show up in like the class discussions though. And that just made me that's one sort of negative thing I just thought the volume. I feel like the volume could have honestly included more characters, because the thing is, the start of the volume is literally just Ayano Koji meeting up with all these leaders, okay? And I feel like Kitagasa has kind of gotten stuck into like a formula, because each volume just has Ayano Koji just meeting all three of the class leaders. So we had Ryuin, Ichinose, then Sakayanagi. He basically just meets with them every single volume. And honestly, at this point, I think he could have taken time to really get other characters involved. Because honestly, these meetings that he had with these three people at the start of the volume don't even really impact the story that much. Besides like Sakayanagi. Sakayanagi's meeting with Ayano Koji is really the only one that really had any impact in like the later end of the volume. But I still feel like you could have really just scrapped all of these meetings and then just focused on some of these other people. You could have focused on Himeno, especially because we had some growth for her in these recent volumes. You could have focused more on like you could have had like Kushida playing a role inside like the meetings, even Sudo. Or you could have had, Morishita do a little bit more too, So, yeah, that's a little one negative thing I had with the volume. But other than that, I also think we all generally agree upon that the Vanguard battle was pretty bad. So, first for class So for the first battle of the Vanguards, we had Hamaguchi versus Hirata, and that one is basically Hirata just kind of just falling over, not really doing a whole lot. He tried, but like he didn't really do that much, and Hamaguchi kind of won a little bit kind of easily. And that's where like Kushida probably would have, the characters even state Kushida, like I said, would have been better in that position than Hirata, because her social skills are far better than most of the other people. And then for the other Vanguard battle, we had who was it? We had Sarada versus Nishino. And then again, Nishino literally just self-destructed herself. So it was like, what was the point of even having her as a Vanguard instead of Hiyori if she was just gonna self-destruct like that? And then the same goes for Kito here. Kito right here, he literally just self-destructed himself Also, so it's like what? It's like why would you have them all three of them just go out like that? And then we had Kanzaki here. Kanzaki, the middle guard, when he faced Horikita, he just gave up. This dude was like hyped, tries to act tough all the time, like Kanzaki tries to basically be the voice of reason inside Ichinose's class, but then it's just like with this special exam, it's just like he gives up, man. He's literally just asking Horikita to just lose the match, and it's like, dude, like come on now, like you still gotta try to win for your class. And so then eventually it became, Ichinose came up, it was her turn, and like, oh my gosh, was she a menace at this for most of her time in this volume? Because obviously, since it's like sort of like the werewolf game, social skills are the most important. You got to be able to read people, and then you got to determine like, okay, who is the person you're trying to seek out. And of course, Ichinose has by far the best social skills, even surpassing probably Kushida. So Ichinose literally just destroyed Horikita. I mean, Horikita stood no chance. And honestly, and I like that. I like it. I like that, but I also didn't like it a little bit too, because the thing is, after this volume, people were basically calling Horikita a fraud, because remember how Manabu, her older brother, was talking about how she had so much potential, she could surpass him. But then it's kind of like with this volume, she just gets steamrolled, she basically got handed two victories because Hamaguchi was especially not a threat in any way, and then Kanzaki just gave up, and then she just gets destroyed by Ichinose. So I understand why people kind of like hated her disliked her a little bit after this volume, because it's like, where's the potential? And I guess now, after reading volume 12.5, now I guess we just gotta wait till the third year to see like what this potential is she has. you know and honestly, it's real. I can't really blame the author too much for some of the decisions, because the biggest thing is that there's like so many big things that happen. Okay, so then Ayana Koji steps up to the plate, and but the illustrations in this volume are super good. But basically, after Horikita got decimated, Ayana Koji steps up, and then he basically just destroys everyone. Like, Ayana Koji is genuinely the only person that actually won in this volume, and it's insane because what he does first is he expels his own classmate. So this is Meizono, okay? And it's crazy that this is literally the first and last illustration we're ever gonna get of her, because Ayana Koji literally expels her, and this dude is just so cold about all of it, okay? So what he does is he expels Meizono, and then basically he had Ichinose help him. So basically, he had Ichinose designate her as the traitor inside this game that they're playing, and then Ayana Koji basically got Meizono to not confess that she was the traitor, and then he ratted her out that she was the traitor, and then she gets expelled because she didn't tell the truth. And because Ichinose kind of helped with that, he then goes on to basically just destroy Ichinose mentally and talks trash about her, how he like spread rumors about her, and then how they're not actually going to have the final meeting. And basically, Ichinose just gives up after that because she is just depressed. She's in such a depressed state that she can't even fight. And so that's how basically Ayana Koji wins. But it's honestly crazy how he's basically the only one who wins. And then it's also crazy just the contrast of his character, okay? So if you've been reading the recent volumes before this, at least from my point of view, it felt like his character didn't really seem as cold as it was before. Okay, so we've we've already known for a long time that he doesn't really care too much for other people, but it still felt like we were moving to a state where like he had some amount of care for his classmates. Like honestly, I thought Ayano Koji was just gonna let Meizono off the hook here, kind of. Like I genuinely thought that there was a chance he could have forgiven her, but he was just straight up like, no, get your butt out, get out of here. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, it just felt like such a stark contrast from like the recent volumes because we had like all the lovey-dovey volumes in like 9.5 and then 9, and then it just goes to him just being like ruthless on like both Meizono and Ichinose, and it was kind of like a little bit of whiplash for me. But y'all let me know how y'all felt about all that in the comments. So yeah, Ichinose's class basically ends up losing the final exam. And honestly, there's really no way for any of the classes to win. And I'll explain that in a second. So then we finally get the conclusion to the battle between Ryuin and Ichinose. And there were obviously a lot of mixed opinions about this because basically Sakayanagi, she basically beats Ryuin, okay? So the battle goes on between the two of them, and it's pretty much neck and neck for like most of their interaction, but like Sakayanagi like slowly pulls away because she's ultimately just better at this. She's just ultimately better at reading people than Ryuin. She saw something that Ryuin couldn't see, and Ryuin basically loses, but then at the last minute, Ryuin tells her that Ayano Koji gave Hashimoto, this guy, a message to tell her. And so, of course, Sakayanagi is like, oh, message from Ayano Koji? I wonder what it is. She basically just kind of jumps to it. I mean, she's upset that she's basically following his plan, but she basically goes along. She asks Hashimoto what the message is, and then Hashimoto is like, wait, what message? He didn't give me a message. And so then Sakayanagi has to figure out, like, hey, what is this message that he has by basically talking to Hashimoto, and then she basically forgives him. She basically forgives him for betraying the class, and then basically the message that Ayano Koji was giving her was to lose the battle, okay? So at this point, she had 5 lives left, and Ryuin had 1 life left. So literally all she had to do was just let Hashimoto expose himself, or she would expose him and then he'd get expelled. So it was basically a done deal. But because this message said from Ayano Koji was like, hey, listen, I don't want to fight you, man. Just please just lose this. And then she just agrees with it, And so obviously this had a bunch of people upset. The way this volume ended, so basically, yeah, Sakayanagi basically loses the final exam for her whole class, and this really upset a lot of people. But honestly, for me, there was really just no way to end for either side to win this, and then just for everyone to be satisfied. So this is what I was talking about a few minutes ago, where it kind of felt like just no one truly could have won in this volume, because if Ryuin lost, then it's like, all the hype that he had building up to where, because, Ayano Koji had been saying that he had the potential to win, that Ryuin definitely could have won because he thought outside the box, sort of, and it just, a lot of people just felt like, Sakayanagi didn't really need to stay anymore. Sakayanagi can get a good job whether she's at the school or not. So that's why I think a lot of people felt like Sakayanagi should have been the one to lose, because Ryuin still had a lot of growth to have and could have still put up a good fight against Ayano Koji. But then it's like, you still have a lot of people that still really love Sakayanagi, and they don't really feel like, and of course they don't really want her to leave, because then who would Class A have? Class A would pretty much just have no one to help lead them. And then at least if Ryuin got expelled, Katsuragi was there, and he probably definitely wouldn't have been as good of a leader, but at least they still had someone to lead. So that's why no matter who won, it would have been sad. People would have been sad. And then for me personally, whether or not Ichinose or Horikita won, either one would have been bad too, because Ichinose just had her character development. She just got recovered, got stronger, and for her to just lose this final exam just like that to like Horikita, that kind of would have been a disappointment for like her growth. But then again, it's also like, a bunch of people thought that Horikita was stronger than Ichinose, Since Horikita had steadily been improving as a leader, especially with the survival and elimination exam, people thought, Horikita was just, straight up stronger than Ichinose, so it wouldn't have really made sense for Horikita to lose. So that's why I can kind of forgive Kinugasa for how he ended, for who he let win, because it would have upset people either way. But ultimately, I think this volume was still very good. I still think it was worth the wait. Because we waited a long time for this final exam to happen, and ultimately, I think it was worth the wait.